The potato peeler slipped from Myra's trembling fingers, clattering against the kitchen floor as her father's broken voice crackled through the phone. "Mom's gone, Mira. We need you now." Gone. Not dead, worse. Consumed by a rare neurological disease that turned her vibrant mother into a shadow, fighting a battle no one knew how to win. The medical bills landed like hammers. $300,000. More money than Mira would earn in a decade of teaching. Her savings account held $1,847. That's when he appeared in the sterile hospital corridor. Julian Marquez, billionaire tech mogul, a man whose name graced magazine covers and whose personal life sparked whispered speculation across the city. "I'll marry you," he said quietly, his dark eyes holding secrets she couldn't read. Myra's heart stopped. Why would you do that? To save her. What she didn't know was that this desperate deal would change everything she thought she knew about love, sacrifice, and herself. Have you ever made an impossible choice to save someone you love? Let me know in the comments. 20 minutes earlier, Myra's biggest concern had been whether to splurge on organic carrots. She'd been humming softly, planning tomorrow's lesson on fractions for her third graders, when the phone rang. Her father never called during dinner. Never. "Dad," she answered, balancing the phone against her shoulder while rinsing vegetables in the tiny sink of her studio apartment. The silence stretched too long. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her knees buckle. "Your mother collapsed at the grocery store this morning. We're at St. Mary's Hospital." The words hit like physical blows. Her mother, Maria Santos, had always been invincible. The woman who worked double shifts as a night nurse, who raised 3 children while earning her degree, who never missed a day of work in 25 years. "The doctors say it's something called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease," her father continued, each syllable heavy with confusion. It's attacking her brain, Mija. They don't know how to stop it." Myra's apartment suddenly felt suffocating. She grabbed her keys, her purse, her jacket, stumbling toward the door while her father explained what the doctors had told him in clinical, devastating detail. The disease was rare, so rare that most physicians never encountered a single case. It moved fast, destroying neural pathways with ruthless efficiency. Experimental treatments existed, cutting-edge therapies being tested in specialized facilities, but insurance companies classified them as investigational. Unproven. Not covered. By the time Mira reached the hospital, she understood the impossible mathematics of their situation. The treatment her mother needed cost $300,000. The clinical trial waiting list stretched 18 months. Time her mother didn't have. Private treatment could begin immediately, but required payment up front. Mira earned $42,000 a year teaching elementary school. After rent, groceries, and student loan payments, she saved maybe $200 a month on good months. Her father drove delivery trucks for a living. Her siblings were struggling college students with their own crushing debt. She sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at the treatment cost estimate, doing the math over and over. Even if she worked 3 jobs, even if she sold everything she owned, even if she borrowed against her future earnings, it wasn't enough. Not even close. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she watched families around her navigate their own crises. Some looked relieved, clutching discharge papers. Others wore the hollow expression she recognized in the bathroom mirror. People watching someone they loved slip away while feeling utterly powerless to stop it. Her mother had 48 hours before the disease would progress past the point where treatment could help. Mira had 48 hours to find $300,000. She had no plan, no wealthy relatives, no secret savings account. She had nothing. Julian Marquez wasn't supposed to be at St. Mary's Hospital at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Men worth $2.3 billion didn't typically frequent public hospitals. They had private physicians, exclusive medical concierges, and personal health teams that made house calls to penthouse suites. Yet there he stood in the neurology wing, his tailored charcoal suit making him look like he'd stepped out of a boardroom and into the wrong movie. Mira recognized him instantly. Everyone in the city knew Julian Marquez, the tech prodigy who'd built his first million-dollar app at 19, then leveraged it into a digital empire that spanned 3 continents. His face graced magazine covers with headlines like "The Billionaire Who Collects Souls" and "Tech's Most Eligible Bachelor Who'll Never Marry." The latter always came with a knowing wink. Julian's sexuality wasn't officially confirmed, but it wasn't exactly hidden either. Society pages documented his attendance at gallery openings with stunning male companions. Gossip columns speculated about his relationship with Dante Rossetti, the enigmatic Italian artist whose paintings commanded 7-figure prices. Tech blogs focused on his business genius, but entertainment outlets obsessed over his personal life, or rather, his deliberate lack of conventional romantic entanglements. He moved through the world with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no applied to himself. Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that seemed to catalog everything while revealing nothing. Even exhausted hospital staff straightened their postures when he passed. Mira had been pacing the corridor outside her mother's room, phone pressed to her ear as she left another desperate voicemail with a loan officer who would never call back, when she noticed him watching her. "Excuse me," he said, approaching with measured steps. His voice carried the slight accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language but spoke it with precision. "Are you Mira Santos?" She blinked, phone still clutched in her hand. "How do you, yes. Why? I knew your mother. She worked the night shift in the cardiac unit when my grandfather was here 2 years ago. She was kind to an old man who spoke no English and trusted no one." He paused, studying Myra's face. "I heard about her diagnosis." The words hung between them in the sterile air. Mira felt simultaneously exposed and confused. Why would a billionaire remember one nurse among thousands? Why was he here? "I'm sorry for your loss," she started, but Julian shook his head. "She's not gone yet." His statement was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. "The experimental treatment at Johns Hopkins. You need funding." It wasn't a question. Myra's throat tightened. "I don't know how you know that, but—" $300,000, Julian continued, plus ongoing care costs, travel expenses, accommodations during treatment. Call it $500,000 total. The numbers hit her like cold water. He'd done his research, knew exactly what her family was facing. The precision felt both helpful and invasive. "I can provide that funding," he said quietly. "But I need something in return." Myra's stomach dropped. She'd heard stories about men like this, powerful men who preyed on desperate women. "I'm not." "Marriage," Julian interrupted. "Legal marriage. 2 years minimum, with option to extend. You'd be covered under my insurance immediately, which expedites treatment approval. You'd live in my residence to maintain appearances. In return, your mother receives the best care available." The proposal landed like a physical blow. Mira stared at him, processing the impossibility of what he'd just suggested. "You're—" she started, then stopped. "Gay." The word felt inappropriate to say aloud, but it hung in the air between them. Julian's expression didn't change. "My personal life is complicated. This arrangement solves multiple problems efficiently. You don't even know me. I know you're a teacher. I know you've exhausted every legal option for funding. I know you have 36 hours before your mother's condition becomes irreversible." His dark eyes met hers. "I know you'll say yes because you don't have another choice." The fluorescent lights hummed above them as Mira felt her world tilt on its axis. Mira stared at Julian Marquez for 30 seconds that felt like 30 years, her mind racing through 1,000 objections and just as many desperate justifications. "You're insane," she whispered finally. "I'm practical," he corrected. "You have a problem. I have a solution. The terms are straightforward." But nothing about this was straightforward. Myra's entire life had been built on earning what she received. Scholarships through good grades, her teaching position through dedication, respect through integrity. The idea of accepting money through marriage felt like selling her soul, even if the marriage was purely transactional. "People will think I'm a gold digger," she said, voicing her deepest fear. Julian shrugged. "People already think things about both of us. Does their opinion matter more than your mother's life?" The question cut through her pride like a blade. In room 314, her mother lay connected to machines, her brilliant mind slowly being devoured by a disease that had no mercy and no timeline. Every hour they debated was an hour closer to permanent damage. When Mira called her father from the hospital parking lot 20 minutes later, his reaction was immediate and explosive. "Absolutely not, Mija. We don't take charity, especially not from strangers with ulterior motives." "It's not charity, Dad. It's a business arrangement. It's prostitution with paperwork." The word stung because part of her feared he was right. How was this different from the transactional relationships she'd always judged? But then she thought about her mother's hands that had changed countless diapers, worked double shifts, held crying patients in the dark hours of the night, now lying motionless against white hospital sheets. Her younger brother Carlos was more pragmatic but equally concerned. What happens when he gets tired of playing house? What happens to Mom's treatment then? He said 2 years minimum. That's enough time for her to complete treatment and recover. "If she recovers," Carlos said quietly. "Mira, what if this doesn't work? What if you sacrifice everything and she dies anyway?" The question haunted her through a sleepless night in the hospital chair beside her mother's bed. She watched the rise and fall of her mother's chest, listened to the steady beep of monitors, and tried to reconcile the woman who'd raised her to be independent with the desperate daughter willing to marry a stranger. Her mother had always been proud of working her way through nursing school while raising 3 children, proud of never asking for help, even when they ate rice and beans for weeks because groceries were tight. Proud of the children who'd all graduated college despite the odds. What would she think of this arrangement? Would she be grateful or humiliated? By dawn, Mira had run through every alternative scenario. Bank loans required collateral she didn't have. Crowdfunding campaigns took months to gain traction. Medical financing companies offered payment plans that would take 40 years to complete. Julian's offer remained the only option that could save her mother within the required time frame. At 7 a.m., she found Julian in the hospital cafeteria, reading financial reports on his phone while drinking black coffee. 2 years, she said without preamble. Legal marriage only. No physical relationship. I want the agreement in writing, reviewed by my own lawyer. Julian looked up, unsurprised by her presence. Agreed. And if this is some elaborate scheme to take advantage of me? Ms. Santos, Julian interrupted. I have better ways to spend $500,000 than elaborate schemes. This benefits us both. As they shook hands across the cafeteria table, Mira wondered if she was saving her mother or destroying herself. Would you enter a fake marriage to save your parents' life? I want to hear your thoughts. The wedding took place on a gray Thursday morning in Judge Patricia Hernandez's chambers, witnessed by 2 court clerks who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Mira wore a navy blue dress she'd bought for parent-teacher conferences. Practical, forgettable, nothing that screamed bride. Julian appeared in another perfectly tailored suit, this one midnight black, carrying a small velvet box that contained rings he'd purchased from Tiffany an hour earlier. The sales associate had asked about ring sizes, styles, preferences. Julian had simply pointed to the most elegant set in the case and said, "Those. No flowers. No music. No guests beyond the legal requirements." Judge Hernandez had performed thousands of civil ceremonies, but even she seemed puzzled by the clinical atmosphere. Do you, Julian Marquez, take Mira Santos to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. The words came out flat, businesslike. Do you, Mira Santos, take Julian Marquez to be your lawfully wedded husband? Myra's throat felt dry. In the background, she could hear the muffled sounds of the courthouse. Phones ringing, heels clicking against marble floors, the everyday business of legal proceedings. This should have been the happiest moment of her life. Instead, it felt like signing a contract for her own imprisonment. I do, she whispered. By the power vested in me by the state of California, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Julian and Mira looked at each other across the 2 feet of space between them, both understanding that this moment would define the boundaries of their arrangement. A kiss would make it feel real, would cross a line neither wanted to acknowledge. Julian extended his hand instead. Mira shook it. Judge Hernandez cleared her throat awkwardly. Well, congratulations. The certificates will be ready in 20 minutes. They signed papers in silence. Myra's signature looked shaky next to Julian's confident scrawl. Mrs. Mira Marquez. The name looked foreign on the official documents, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Outside the courthouse, photographers waited. News of Julian Marquez's sudden marriage had leaked somehow, probably through courthouse staff who couldn't resist the gossip goldmine of a billionaire secret wedding. Camera flashes exploded as they emerged, reporters shouting questions. Julian, when did you know she was the one? Mrs. Marquez, how does it feel to marry one of the world's most eligible bachelors? Is this a business merger or true love? Julian's hand found the small of Myra's back, guiding her toward a waiting black sedan. To the cameras, it probably looked protective, romantic. To Mira, it felt like being steered by a stranger who happened to share her last name now. Smile, he murmured near her ear as they walked. Look happy. Mira forced her lips upward, hoping it resembled joy rather than nausea. The photographers ate it up, capturing what would become the iconic image splashed across tomorrow's society pages. Billionaire tech mogul Julian Marquez and his mysterious new wife, both looking elegant and completely disconnected from each other. In the car, they sat in silence as the driver navigated through downtown traffic toward Julian's penthouse. Mira twisted the unfamiliar weight of the wedding ring around her finger. A stunning emerald-cut diamond that probably cost more than her annual salary. The media attention will die down, Julian said, not looking up from his phone. In 2 weeks, they'll find someone else to obsess over. And until then, we play the part of newlyweds who value their privacy. The word newlyweds hung in the air like a bad joke. They were married strangers, bound together by legal documents and medical necessity. As the city blurred past the tinted windows, Mira wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Her mother's treatment would begin tomorrow. The marriage was already serving its purpose. So why did she feel like she'd just buried her old life instead of saving the most important person in it? Julian's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city sprawling endlessly below. Mira had never lived anywhere higher than the 3rd floor of her apartment building. The height made her dizzy. "Your room is down the hall," Julian said, setting her single suitcase, everything she owned fit into one bag, beside a marble console table that probably cost more than her car. Private bathroom, walk-in closet, balcony access. The housekeeper comes Mondays and Thursdays. Mrs. Chen doesn't speak much English, but she's efficient. He spoke like he was giving a hotel orientation to a guest who'd booked an extended stay. The guest bedroom was larger than her entire studio apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold with art that looked museum quality. A king-sized bed dominated the space, topped with pillows that probably had thread counts higher than her monthly rent. "There's a credit card on the dresser," Julian continued. "For household expenses, groceries, anything you need. Don't worry about limits." Mira picked up the black American Express card with her new name embossed in silver letters. "I don't need." "You do." His tone was firm but not unkind. "You're Julian Marquez's wife now. People will expect you to look the part. Shopping, dining, social events. It's all part of maintaining the facade." The word facade stung more than it should have. She knew this was all pretend, but hearing it stated so bluntly made her feel like an actress who'd forgotten she was performing. Their first week together established a routine that felt more like sharing space with a polite roommate than living with a spouse. Julian left for work before 6 a.m., returned after 8 p.m., and spent most evenings in his home office fielding calls with investors in different time zones. Mira visited her mother at the hospital, marveled at the speed with which treatment had been approved and initiated, and tried to figure out how to fill the remaining hours of each day. The penthouse felt like living inside a magazine spread, beautiful, perfect, and utterly sterile. Everything had its place, from the precisely arranged books on built-in shelves to the fresh orchids that appeared weekly, courtesy of some invisible service. Mira was afraid to touch anything, worried she'd leave fingerprints on surfaces that gleamed like mirrors. The hardest part was the public appearances. "The Henderson Foundation Gala is Saturday," Julian announced over breakfast, the first meal they'd shared all week. He ate steel-cut oats and read the Wall Street Journal simultaneously. "It's important we're seen together." Mira nearly choked on her coffee. "I don't know how to do galas." You'll learn quickly. A stylist will come Thursday to select your dress and accessories. Hair and makeup will arrive Saturday at 4. You've thought of everything, she said, not entirely as a compliment. Julian glanced up from his newspaper. Details matter in business, Mira. This marriage is a business arrangement. We succeed by managing every variable. Every variable. That's what she was to him. A problem solved, a box checked, a variable managed. At the gala, she smiled until her face hurt while Julian introduced her to tech executives, venture capitalists, and society figures whose names she'd only seen in magazines. She wore a midnight blue gown that cost more than her monthly salary and felt like playing dress-up in someone else's life. "How did you two meet?" asked Patricia Whitman, wife of a prominent city councilman, her eyes sharp with curiosity. Julian's hand found Myra's waist, pulling her slightly closer. "Through mutual friends," he said smoothly. "Sometimes the best relationships develop when you're not looking for them." Mira forced another smile, wondering how he could lie so effortlessly while making it sound like poetry. The gossip columns the next week were merciless. Julian Marquez's mystery wife. Gold digger or true love? From classroom to penthouse, the teacher who landed a billionaire. Is this marriage real or just another business deal? Reading the speculation made Myra's skin crawl, but Julian seemed genuinely unbothered by the attention. "Publicity comes with the territory," he said when she mentioned the articles. "It'll fade." "Easy for you to say. They're not calling you a social climber." Julian paused in his review of quarterly reports, studying her face. "Does it bother you what strangers think?" "Doesn't it bother you?" "No," he said simply. "I learned long ago that other people's opinions are just noise. The only thing that matters is whether we accomplish our objectives." Their objectives. Her mother's health, his mysterious reasons for needing a wife. Everything else was just performance. The first real conversation happened 3 weeks into their marriage, at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Mira couldn't sleep, a combination of the unfamiliar silence of the penthouse and worry about her mother's latest test results. She'd wandered to the kitchen for tea and found Julian standing at the massive windows, still dressed in his work clothes, staring out at the city lights below. "Insomnia?" she asked quietly, not wanting to startle him. Julian turned, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely tired. Not just physically exhausted, but worn down in a way that expensive suits and perfect posture couldn't hide. "Something like that," he said. "The Tokyo markets opened an hour ago. I should be reviewing the quarterly projections for the Asia division." But he wasn't reviewing anything. He was just standing there, looking lost in his own home. Mira made 2 cups of chamomile tea without asking, setting one on the counter beside him. "Rough day." Julian accepted the tea with a nod of thanks. Every day is rough when you're performing a role you never auditioned for. The honesty in his voice surprised her. For weeks, their interactions had been polite but surface level. Discussions about schedules, public appearances, household logistics. Never anything real. "What do you mean?" she asked. Julian was quiet for a long moment, and Mira thought he might retreat back into his CEO persona. Instead, he sank into one of the leather chairs at the kitchen island, suddenly looking younger than his 31 years. "Everyone expects me to be this person," he said slowly. "The brilliant tech mogul who has it all figured out. The man who built an empire before he could legally drink. The success story who proves the American dream is alive and well. He paused, running his fingers through his dark hair, messing up the perfect styling for the first time since she'd known him. But the truth is, I've been trapped in this image for so long, I forgot who I was before it. I wake up every morning and put on Julian Marquez like it's a costume. I say the right things, make the right moves, attend the right events. And at the end of the day, I come home to this. He gestured around the immaculate penthouse, this beautiful prison I built for myself. Mira set down her tea, studying his face in the dim lighting. Is that why you needed a wife? To complete the costume? Julian's laugh was hollow. Partially. The board of directors, the investors, the public, they all expect a certain narrative. The successful bachelor was fine for a while, but now they want stability, maturity, someone who's settled down. Marriage checks that box. And the other part? His jaw tensed. The other part is that I'm tired of lying about who I am, but I don't know how to tell the truth without losing everything I've built. The vulnerability in his admission hit Mira like a physical force. She'd married a stranger for her mother's medical bills, but she was starting to understand that Julian had married a stranger to save himself from suffocation. You know what's funny? She said softly. I've spent my whole life being exactly who I am, a teacher, a daughter, someone who saves every penny and plans for the future. And now I'm living this lie, pretending to be someone I'm not. Meanwhile, you've been living a lie for years, and this marriage is just another layer of it. Julian looked at her with something that might have been recognition. We're both performers now. Maybe, Mira said, but at least we know we're performing. That has to count for something. They sat in comfortable silence after that. Two strangers who'd bound their lives together for reasons that had nothing to do with love, finding an unexpected moment of understanding in the early morning hours. Outside, the city hummed with the energy of people sleeping, dreaming, living their authentic lives. Inside the penthouse, Julian and Mira began to realize that maybe their arrangement could offer something neither had expected. The freedom to be honest with at least one other person. Have you ever felt trapped by other people's expectations? Share your story below. Mira first noticed the change in Julian on a Thursday morning in late October. He'd been distracted during breakfast, checking his phone repeatedly and responding to messages with an urgency she'd never seen before. Everything okay? She asked, watching him type rapidly on his phone while his coffee grew cold. Fine, he said, but his voice carried an edge she didn't recognize. Just some complications with an art acquisition. She didn't think much of it until the flowers arrived. Not the usual weekly orchids from the service Julian used, but a massive arrangement of white gardenias and baby's breath, elegant and deliberately chosen. The card was simple. Looking forward to reconnecting. D. Julian found the flowers when he returned from work, and Mira watched his entire demeanor shift. The careful control he maintained dissolved, replaced by something raw and unguarded. Who's D? She asked, trying to keep her tone casual. Dante Rossetti, Julian said quietly, not meeting her eyes. He's an artist. We knew each other before. The way he said knew each other made it clear their relationship had been far more than professional. Mira felt an unexpected twist in her stomach. Not quite jealousy, but something close to it. 2 days later, Dante appeared at their penthouse. Mira answered the door to find a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, intense green eyes, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean heritage. He wore jeans and a simple white button-down shirt with the kind of casual elegance that couldn't be bought. "You must be the wife," he said, his accent carrying hints of Italy. Not rude exactly, but not particularly warm either. "Mira," she said, extending her hand. "Dante." His handshake was firm, his gaze assessing. "Is Julian home?" Before she could answer, Julian appeared in the foyer. The transformation was immediate. His usually perfect posture became slightly defensive, his confident expression replaced by something vulnerable and guarded. "Dante," Julian said, and Mira heard years of history in the single word. "Hello, Julian." Dante's smile was complex, carrying both affection and something that looked like disappointment. "You look well. Marriage suits you." The comment felt loaded with meaning Mira couldn't decipher, but she watched Julian's jaw tighten in response. "What are you doing here?" Julian asked, not moving from his position near the doorway. "My exhibition opens next week at the Morrison Gallery. I wanted to invite you personally." Dante's eyes flicked to Mira, then back to Julian. "Both of you, of course." Julian's careful mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked like longing mixed with pain. "I don't think that's a good idea." "No." Dante stepped closer, and Mira felt like she was witnessing a conversation conducted in a language she didn't understand. "I think it's exactly what you need." After Dante left, Julian retreated to his office and didn't emerge until the next morning. For the first time since their marriage, Mira realized she might not be the only one living with secrets that could change everything. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Friday night, jolting Mira from restless sleep with the harsh ring that could only mean bad news. "Miss Santos, Mrs. Marquez." Dr. Kim's voice was carefully controlled, but Mira could hear the tension underneath. "You need to come to the hospital immediately. Your mother's condition has deteriorated significantly." The words hit her like ice water. For 6 weeks, her mother's treatment had been progressing steadily. Not miraculous improvement, but stable progress that gave them all hope. Now that progress was crashing down around them. Mira threw on clothes in the dark, her hands shaking as she tried to find her keys. She was halfway to the door when she realized Julian was standing in the hallway, fully dressed despite the late hour. "I'll drive," he said simply. "You don't have to." "I'm driving," he repeated, taking her keys from her trembling fingers. The ride to St. Mary's passed in a blur of empty streets and red traffic lights that seemed to last forever. Julian's hands gripped the steering wheel with the same intensity he brought to board meetings, navigating through the city with precise efficiency while Mira tried to prepare herself for whatever was waiting. Dr. Kim met them in the neurology wing, her expression grave. The treatment triggered an unexpected inflammatory response. "Her brain is swelling, and we've had to induce a coma to prevent further damage." The words bounced off Mira like physical blows. Inflammatory response. Brain swelling. Induced coma. Medical terms that meant her mother might never wake up, might never speak again, might slip away despite everything they'd sacrificed to save her. "What are her chances?" Julian asked, his voice steady when Mira couldn't find words. Dr. Kim hesitated. "The next 48 hours are critical. If the swelling responds to treatment, she could recover fully. If not..." She didn't finish the sentence. Mira spent the next day and night in the chair beside her mother's bed, watching the rise and fall of mechanical breathing, listening to the steady beep of monitors that marked each heartbeat like a countdown. Julian stayed too, leaving only to handle calls that couldn't wait and returning with coffee she couldn't drink and food she couldn't eat. On the second night, as rain hammered against the hospital windows, Mira finally broke. "This is my fault," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I pushed for this treatment. I made this deal with you. I gambled with her life because I was too proud to let her go peacefully." Julian looked up from his laptop, where he'd been pretending to work for the past hour. "That's not true, isn't it? She was stable before. Not getting better, but not getting worse either. I could have just been with her. Instead, I turned her into some kind of medical experiment because I couldn't accept that sometimes love means letting go." The words poured out of her like poison she'd been storing, months of guilt and fear and desperate hope finally finding voice in the quiet darkness of the hospital room. Julian closed his laptop and moved to the chair beside her. For a moment, she thought he might offer empty reassurances or logical arguments about why she'd made the right choice. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm against her cold skin, and said, "You fought for her because that's who you are. Don't let fear make you regret being brave." The rain had stopped by the time they stepped onto the hospital balcony, but the air still carried the clean scent of washed concrete and possibility. Mira had needed escape from the sterile intensity of her mother's room, and Julian had followed without being asked. They stood at the railing, 40 feet above the city, watching late-night traffic move through empty streets like slow-moving rivers of light. The silence between them felt different than their usual polite distance. Heavier, more loaded with things that needed to be said. "You don't have to stay," Mira said finally. "This isn't what you signed up for." Julian leaned against the railing, his profile sharp against the city lights. "What do you think I signed up for? A convenient arrangement. A wife who'd play the part at social events and stay out of your way otherwise. Not hospital vigils and medical crises and—" She gestured helplessly. "This emotional mess. You think this is just business to me?" Something in his voice made her turn to look at him directly. In the dim lighting, his carefully maintained composure had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "Isn't it?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight she'd never heard before. "I've spent my entire adult life building walls," he said slowly. "Emotional walls, professional walls, walls between who I am and who the world expects me to be. I became so good at it that I forgot there was supposed to be someone real living behind them. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. When Dante left 3 years ago, he told me I was suffocating myself, that I'd chosen success over authenticity so completely that I'd lost the ability to connect with anyone, including him." Julian's laugh was bitter. He was right. I'd built this perfect image of Julian Marquez, the brilliant CEO, and I was trapped inside it like a cage. Mira felt her heart rate quicken. This was more honesty than Julian had offered in their entire marriage, and she sensed they were approaching territory that would change everything between them. "The marriage was supposed to be another wall," he continued. "Another layer of protection. A wife who'd give me respectability without demanding intimacy. Safe distance disguised as partnership. And now, Julian turned to face her fully, and in his dark eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Now I realize that watching you fight for your mother, seeing you sacrifice everything for love without hesitation, it's shown me what courage actually looks like. Not the calculated risks I take in business, but real bravery. The kind that puts someone else's needs before your own pride. The words hit her like a revelation she hadn't seen coming. All these weeks, she'd felt like the desperate one, the one who'd needed saving. But Julian was telling her that somehow, in the process of saving her mother, she'd been saving him too. "You're not trapped anymore," she said softly. "No," Julian agreed. "But I'm not the same person who made that deal with you either. This arrangement, this marriage, it was supposed to be temporary, transactional. But somewhere along the way, it became real for me. Not romantic love like fairy tales promise, but something deeper. Partnership. Trust. The kind of connection I'd convinced myself I didn't need." Mira felt tears building behind her eyes, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of fear. "I don't know how to be married for real," she admitted. "I don't know how to live in your world or be the wife people expect Julian Marquez to have." "I don't know how to be a real husband either," Julian said. "But maybe we can figure it out together. Not because of contracts or medical bills, but because we choose to." The city stretched out below them, millions of people living their own complicated stories of love and loss and hope. For the first time since their wedding day, Mira felt like she and Julian might be writing a story worth telling. Dr. Kim found them in the hospital cafeteria at 6:32 a.m., 3 days after the crisis began. Mira was staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago while Julian scrolled through emails he wasn't really reading. They'd both given up on sleep, existing in the strange liminal space of people waiting for news that would either save or destroy their world. "Mrs. Marquez?" Dr. Kim's voice carried something Mira hadn't heard in days. Cautious optimism. They looked up simultaneously, and Myra's heart stopped at the small smile playing at the corners of the doctor's mouth. "The swelling has reduced significantly. Your mother's brain activity is normalizing, and we're going to try bringing her out of the coma this afternoon." The words took several seconds to penetrate Myra's exhaustion. She's going to be okay. We're cautiously optimistic." The inflammatory response was severe, but her body fought back stronger than we anticipated. "The experimental treatment appears to be working, just not in the timeline we expected." Mira felt Julian's hand find hers under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers as the news settled over them like sunrise after the longest night. When her mother opened her eyes 6 hours later, the first thing she said was, "Mija, you look terrible. Are you eating enough?" Mira laughed through tears. She didn't realize she was crying. "Hi, Mom. I missed you." "I wasn't going anywhere," her mother said with the stubborn determination that had defined her entire life. "Though I had some very strange dreams about you getting married to a rich man. Completely ridiculous, of course." Mira glanced at Julian, who was standing quietly near the window, giving them space for their reunion while remaining close enough to provide support if needed. "Actually, Mom, there's something I need to tell you about that." Over the following weeks, as her mother's recovery progressed from tentative to remarkable, Mira began to understand what their desperate arrangement had actually accomplished. Yes, it had saved her mother's life. The treatment was working better than anyone had dared hope, with minimal side effects and steady improvement in cognitive function. But it had done something else entirely. It had forced both Julian and Mira to confront the walls they'd built around themselves. Hers made of pride and independence, his constructed from expectations and fear of vulnerability. The marriage that had begun as a transaction between strangers had evolved into something neither had anticipated. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and the kind of trust that could only develop between people who'd seen each other at their most desperate and chosen to stay anyway. "You know what's funny?" Mira said one evening as they sat in her mother's hospital room, watching her work on physical therapy exercises with determined focus. "What's that?" Julian asked, looking up from the financial reports he'd been reviewing. 6 months ago, I thought love was supposed to be simple. Meet someone, fall in love, get married, live happily ever after. But this, she gestured between them, encompassing everything their relationship had become, this is more complicated and more real than anything I ever imagined. Julian smiled, the first completely genuine expression she'd seen from him since the day they'd met. "Sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places," he said. Outside the hospital window, the city hummed with life, full of people searching for connection in all the traditional ways. Inside room 314, 2 people who'd married for survival discovered they'd found something much more valuable. A love that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with choosing each other again and again when it mattered most. 5 years later, Mira stood in Julian's sprawling garden, watching her mother teach their 8-year-old nephew Carlos how to plant tomatoes. The scene was so ordinary, so beautifully mundane, that it took her breath away. Her mother moved with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned not to take simple movements for granted, but she moved. She laughed. She argued with Julian about the best fertilizer for the roses and won every time. "Penny for your thoughts?" Julian appeared beside her, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea and wearing jeans that would have been unthinkable during their first year of marriage. "Just thinking about how none of this was supposed to happen," Mira said, accepting the tea gratefully. Their marriage had evolved into something the media still struggled to categorize. Not a traditional romance, but not merely a business arrangement either. They'd found their own rhythm, separate bedrooms but shared dreams, individual independence within committed partnership. Dante had become a regular presence in their lives, his friendship with Julian restored to something healthier than their previous intensity. He'd even painted a portrait of Myra's mother that hung in their living room, capturing her strength and stubborn joy with remarkable accuracy. "The foundation paperwork came through yesterday," Julian mentioned casually, though Mira knew he was anything but casual about their latest project. The Santos Marquez Foundation for Rare Disease Research had been Julian's idea, funded by his wealth but guided by Myra's understanding of what families in crisis actually needed. Not just money for treatment, but support for the emotional journey that came with watching someone you love fight for their life. "So we're officially in the business of helping people now," Mira said. "We always were. We just made it legal." Her mother's laughter carried across the garden as little Carlos triumphantly held up a handful of earth, dirt streaking his face with pure joy. It was the sound of a life fully lived, of second chances embraced with both hands. "No regrets?" Julian asked, the question he'd been asking in various forms for 5 years. Mira considered everything that had brought them to this moment. The desperate phone call, the impossible proposal, the night spent in hospital corridors, the slow building of trust between 2 people who'd started as strangers. "None," she said, meaning it completely. They'd proven that love didn't always look like the movies promised. Sometimes it looked like 2 people choosing to build something real from the most unlikely beginning, creating a family that worked precisely because it had never been traditional. Sometimes the most unexpected relationships change us the most. What's a relationship that transformed your life? Tell us your story. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's just as captivating, with even more twists and intrigue than you can imagine. Don't miss out. Click the image on your screen now to watch the next story.